We need to talk about what is going on with the government of national unity in South Africa. Not so much what the ANC is doing with the government of national unity, because that seems to be quite clear, but about what the opposition parties and the leaders of the opposition parties are doing, or what they think they might achieve with what they are currently doing. So the GNU just came back from a 2-day retreat at the Cradle of Humankind near Krugersdorp. President Ramaphosa, of course, who led this retreat, said that there were moments of quiet, nice joy amid moments of serious talk. Now, from news reports about this retreat, it seems that there is broad agreement and consensus among the various party leaders about the way forward. In fact, it went so far that Gayton and Mackenzie said that the unity within the government of national unity could be described as holy. Now, strange, given that the opposition party leaders are so optimistic about the meeting, several of them spoke anonymously to the media, and here is what they said. Firstly, there is nothing that was discussed at this GNU meeting on which there was massive disagreement. Secondly, that, and I quote, "I think it is a natural settling period. I think the coalition is entering a more mature phase now where we have accepted that we all need each other, and frankly, the country needs us to stand together and do what is right for the country." And then another quote, "The meeting was saying people must toe the line. We must not take chances. If we behave in the manner some parties in the GNU have been behaving," which is presumably a reference to the DA and the DA's campaigns about issues such as BEE and so forth, "we are sending a message that this thing is not working and we are not listening to each other." And then again, an anonymous party leader remarked the following: "This is problematic of the DA, that they like to raise these issues," again referring to BEE and major policy disagreements, expropriation without compensation, the Bella Act and so forth, outside of the GNU. They raise them in billboards in Johannesburg, media and press statements, but within the GNU, they don't raise them. This is why I said there were no tensions in the room, because John Steenhuisen, didn't bring any into the room. He was collaborative, speaking about the diversification of trade and opportunities that he's now finding in China, and he never thought that he would fall in love with China. He was a very different party leader. He didn't raise any of the issues the DA has around economic policy. And so at this meeting, the GNU has set up an MTDP, a medium-term development plan, and I'm going to read, not the whole thing, but only a short extract thereof, of the 3-page statement that they have issued, which is particularly the goals of the MTDP. And so bear with me if it sounds boring, but I will discuss them afterwards. So the leaders have agreed to give urgent attention to several key areas, and I quote from the press statement: "Ensuring greater urgency and action in the implementation of government programs, the streamlining of processes and structures, and the further professionalization and depoliticization of the public service. Developing a food security plan to address the dire situation of hunger affecting many households and communities across the country. A comprehensive and far-reaching strategy for skills development and the creation of work experience and livelihood opportunities for young people. Mobilizing law enforcement and security services and key stakeholders to intensify the fight against the rise in gangsterism and organized crime. The appointment of capable, ethical leadership in the criminal justice system. Equipping national and provincial government to intervene more effectively where municipalities fail to fulfill their mandates. Undertaking a comprehensive response to illegal immigration, including strengthening border management and expanding economic opportunities for South Africans, and improving oversight and coordination of state-owned enterprises and setting minimum standards for board appointments. Now, what do we gather from this? Some of them sound quite nice, but all of this talk that happened at this Government of National Unity happened against the backdrop of a perception of broad policy agreement. Because all of these measures that were decided on have to do with government implementation. How is the government going to solve societal issues? The problem is the government acts according to the policies that are in place. And so the policy framework sets the table on which action is taken. It is quite clear that no discussion happened about the policy framework because the parties were so committed to strengthening a sense of unity within the GNU. The only discussion seems to have been about how the government is going to act within the policy framework, within the framework of BEE, within the framework of expropriation without compensation, within the framework of the Bella Act, within the framework of cadre deployment, and so forth. Now, this is not to say that these parties agree on all these things, but again, according to themselves, they disagree outside the GNU, and then they act within that framework inside the GNU, which is not a surprise because Dean McPherson, for example, who is a member of parliament for the DA, has said before that if the Expropriation Act is signed and is implemented, that he intends to implement it because then it would be government policy. So if they don't address the policy framework, the question is, what's the point in having a GNU? What's the point in being optimistic of the prospects of the GNU when we know the problem is the system, the structure that ought to be reformed? There was no discussion about political reform, merely about implementing the ideas of the president within the framework of his policy direction. And it is also concerning that all of these policy ideas had to do with the government solving societal issues. Now, the government in South Africa has not been able to solve any societal issues since it took power. It has only made things worse. And it is not because there is something exceptional about the South African government. That is the case for all governments. Thomas Sowell famously concluded in the 80s already that he wasn't able to find a single example of people who were able to be uplifted from poverty into affluence through politics, through government programs. The way to address these issues is for the government to step back to ensure that there is a healthy policy framework. But that does not seem to be the goal of the Government of National Unity. And this reminds me of the time I spoke in Parliament in 2018 when I was with AfriForum about expropriation without compensation. I criticized this policy framework of expropriation without compensation, and I was then vehemently attacked by not so much the ANC, but opposition parties in Parliament. Virtually every single one of them. The ones that didn't attack me decided to merely keep quiet. Even including the DA, who said in this particular committee that they could not agree with a single thing that I have said, when my entire speech was about why expropriation without compensation would be bad for the country. One of these members of parliament came to apologize afterwards, and I spoke with this person and asked, why did this happen? Why did these opposition party members who publicly say that they are against EWC start attacking people who are now criticizing EWC? And he said to me that there was a sense of solidarity within the committee. And when I came to this meeting in Parliament and I criticized or attacked the policy of EWC or confiscation of private property, even though it was an ANC policy, the committee itself felt like they were attacked. Apparently, an ANC member of Parliament said to the others, "We have to do something," and they then fell in line. Now, this is a very dangerous state of affairs for South Africa. If opposition parties can so easily become co-opted under the pretense of cooperation, under the pretense of making it work, when we know already that the government of national unity is not working. In fact, trust in the government of national unity has eroded significantly since it was established a little more than a year ago. A recent Ipsos poll has found that 80% of people in South Africa now believe the country is headed in the wrong direction. 40% of people say that the GNU has changed nothing in South Africa, and 39% think the GNU will fall apart shortly as the parties differ too much. And so the question we should ask ourselves is if the GNU is really such a great step in the right direction. The question we should also ask ourselves is, what are these opposition parties doing, and what do they think they are going to achieve by trying to implement government policy within the existing policy framework when they know that the policy framework is the problem, or at least when some of them know that the policy framework is the problem. The question is if this is what their voters voted for, and I would venture to say that the answer is no. As long as there is not discussion about political reform, about decentralization, about promoting autonomy and self-governance, this country is not going to move towards the better future that the GNU is promising.